Welcome, church family. Happy Sabbath. We're so glad that you could join us today on Zoom. Still distance, but we're glad to have you regardless. My name is Sebastian. I introduced myself last Sabbath, but just in case anybody wasn't here, doesn't know who I am. Just like David, I'm one of the externs here, and today I am here to do with the announcements. I go to PUC. I'm also a military veteran, and I'm just so happy that I can be here to worship with you, church family. So, some of the announcements that we have for today. So, daylight savings time ends tomorrow. So, don't forget to set your clocks back 1 hour. It's that time of year. We start to notice the days get a little bit shorter, but thankfully, daylight savings time can come in and help that. Another thing that we have is we want to see you, church family. So what we're doing is we have a hashtag. It's hashtag Napa Community CH. No spaces, all one word. So we want you to send in our photos because we want to see you and we want to let others see your photos. Another thing that we have the No Tricks, Just Treats. It's going to be at the Napa Community Church tonight from 6 to 7. And we want you to bring your costumes. We're gonna make sure everything is safe. That is one of our top priorities. But we're still gonna have what community we can in these difficult times. So bring your costumes. We're gonna have candy. We're gonna have photos, and we would love to see you in person. So with that, I'd like to hand it off to Star, who has some more announcements.
Thank you very much, Sebastian. And I'm very happy to be here with you today. And we are going to have a wonderful worship time together. We have something to be very, very thankful and excited for. Jonathan and Trish Gershell are having a baby. And they are fortunate that they get to know exactly when that's going to happen. It's tomorrow. And so just a chain of events that came together to have them be able to plan the birth of their child, and we're very excited for them. So tomorrow is going to be a very, very happy day, and we're definitely um, celebrating with them the birth of their child. I am here this morning to kind of give you an update on how our board meeting went on Monday night. It was not without challenges because of the public safety power shutoffs, but I'll share a little more of that with you later. But we had a really good board meeting. And it started off with prayer, as we always do, because we need the Lord to guide us in the decisions we make. And Pastor Nate um, presented the idea that his father has been helping a lot, Ernie Furness, and he uh, presented the idea that we have him join our board as a non-voting member, but he has been very, very helpful while Pastor Nate has not had an associate. And so we're very thankful for that. And I might add that October, this is the last day of October, is Pastor Appreciation Month. So thank you very much, Pastor Nate, Pastor Ernie, our two externs, David and Sebastian. We appreciate you very much. After we voted to have Pastor Ernie join us as a non-voting board member, Bob presented our financial report, and it looks very good. Of course, our expenses are down because we don't have all the normal expenses that we would have if we were physically meeting. Um, but the giving has just been amazing. And I want to say thank you to each and every one of you who so faithfully gives. The area that we have a bit of concern with is student aid, because we usually pick up that offering during the church service, and the kids are there, and that helps feed our student aid fund. That is depleting. We have enough to get us through this year, but the concern is, as we're meeting this way and not having our normal offerings, um, that fund will be struggling next year. So as you're doing your giving, remember the student aid fund and add to it. We appreciate it. Thank you. After Bob finished his report, then Pastor Nate gave us a report on the school and the fact that they are running a hybrid uh, offering right now for the students. And that is very taxing on the teachers because they're essentially having to prepare two types of learning um, experiences, and that's very time consuming. So the teachers are really working hard, and we want to reach out to them and say thank you for their service and for always being there for our kids and guiding them and leading them to Jesus. We really appreciate everything they do. Um, we also learned that the school is going to a 4-day schedule. They will not be meeting on Fridays, but everything is going very well. Justine Leone has done a wonderful job through COVID in bringing very creative things and guiding and leading the teachers, and the teachers have responded very, very well to all of the things that have come across their path. So we really appreciate them. Carl Riddell was not able to join us because of the public safety power shutoffs. And I know I had to take special measures to get to board meeting. I had to go back to work because I had no power at my house. So those power shutoffs really impact us all. But Carl is saying that community services is going well. He talked about the fact they've received lots of donations, but not a whole lot of people coming to get items. So we did discuss a little bit that maybe we could share some of our things with Up Valley. We know that the Howell Mountain Public or Community Services was burnt to the ground, so they might be able to use some of our resources. So we discussed that. And then Gerhardt from our finance committee, the finance chair, we discussed at great length a donation that was given to us by the Carmichael Church and then an anonymous donor, and it amounted to about $4,000. And we have used some of those funds. The funds were given to us to assist people who had been impacted by the Glass Mountain fires. And so we did some meals, and we've spent a portion of that money, but there is a good chunk of it left. And we discussed at great length that maybe the best way for us to get that money to people who'd been affected by the Glass Mountain fires was to pass it on to the PUC church and let them distribute it because they're closer. And so the motion was made and approved that that is what we would do unless we found people within our congregation that had been impacted by the fires that needed funds. So that's what will be happening. And then Pastor Nate came back and shared a little bit about Chico Von Poli and Barrett, and the fact that he was able to travel down there with his dad and be with Chico and Barrett. That was just a wonderful blessing. We're so glad he was able to do that. And then he went on to tell us that we've found a safety officer for the church. So that means we're poised and ready to start training our volunteers for church reopening. So we hope to have that happen very, very soon. I can hardly wait to see people, even if they've got masks on their face. I don't care. I'll just be happy to see people and be gathering once again to worship together. That will be wonderful. For now, we're taking advantage of technology, and we're so happy you're here with us today. Thank you.
Good morning and welcome to worship. It's so good to be together, moms and dad, boys and girls. This is where we live. We're not too far from Yosemite, and as you look out behind me, you could perhaps see the barn and maybe even see some of our goats or donkeys that are there. We're going to look at a story relating to rocks. This is where we lived. But if you notice around us, there are lots and lots of rocks. You can see them all over the place. They're not just ordinary rocks. Some people take these rocks for granted. But as you look at them, you can see some interesting shapes. When we were building this house, we had to move it several times to avoid some rocks. If you look over in here, perhaps in this mix of rocks, you might see a bit of a whale. If we turn this way, you'll see where we place our wood. We need wood in which to keep warm in the winter. You have all of these rocks that you can look at and see different shapes in them. It's interesting on how they may look. Some even think that this particular rock looks like a frog. We have one very big rock that's right out in front of our house. Now, this very big rock has an interesting story behind it. I think many of you may know my grandchildren. There's Alex, who is the oldest, that goes to Napa, and Anders. One time they came to visit us here at our property. When we were living here, we had some workmen working on a deck that needed to be removed. It had weathered over the years and had rotted, and it would be just too hard to put it back, and so we had them taking it down. While they were taking it down, Alex came down to this large rock. And as you can see, it's very, very steep. There's no steps up the rock. There's no ladder going up the rock. It is smooth and flat with maybe a few little crevices that you can see within the rock. As the men were working up above, they saw Alex come to the foot of the rock. They pulled out a few more nails and turned, and Alex was about halfway up the rock. They thought, what do we do? Do we say, be careful? Do they call him by name? Do they say, you shouldn't be doing that? No, they let him keep climbing. His grandmother then came down and was watching too, as Alex went all the way up the side of the steep rock and reached the top and grabbed the edge of the top and climbed over and stood up tall, very proud of what he did. Indeed, that is an accomplishment. But when Grandma said, you did a good job, Alex, you really know how to climb. But she said, next time you climb, make sure your dad or your uncle or someone is there with you to guide you, to help you, or to maybe catch you in case you might fall. Alex was agreeable with that. And it's a good thing to remember. There are some things that are fun to do, but it is always good on some of those things, especially if they could be dangerous, to have somebody close by. I have some pictures that you could see, maybe even they will come up now, of a time a little later when Alex and Anders were with us on a trip in the Sierra Mountains. And there was a rock, not quite as difficult as this, but they decided to climb it. And they did a good job climbing it, and they made it to the top. But their Uncle Chris was there to watch them, to catch them if something went wrong. Always has somebody there to catch you. Now today, Pastor Nate is going to talk about a rock. Well, not really about a rock, about a mountain. This rock could be a small mountain, but it's a mountain that Moses goes up for the last time. Moses, if you want to look at the book of Exodus, is always going up a mountain and coming down, and then going up again and coming down, and then going up another time and coming down. You can almost read the book of Exodus of Moses climbing the mountain and climbing back down. I want you to listen to what Pastor Nate says about the mountain and about Moses and the mountain he climbed for the last time. Now, guys, have a good Sabbath. Enjoy the rest of the worship service. Have a good time with your family, and may God bless each one of you.
Thank you, Ernie, for that amazing children's story. And as Star mentioned, this is Pastor Appreciation Month. So we have a number of retired pastors in our congregation that we would like to mention today. Jim Pedersen, Lyle Bennett, and Ron Wisby. Thank you so much for your ministry and everything that you do for this church. We really appreciate you. So with that, we would like to lead into our worship and offering, and Gerhard Haas is going to lead us. So Gerhard.
Good morning, friends. Each week, we ask that you participate with your giving in the financial health of our church, not only for our local church here in Napa, but for the work of the Adventist Church in California, in the United States, and around the world. Most weeks, your offering goes to support the ministry and the maintenance of our local church, but about once a month, the greater church asks that we support missions beyond our area. This week, the Pacific Union asks that we support the union project entitled Impact Pacific, which provides funds for particular mission needs unique to our union. Work with Native Americans and Native Hawaiians, particularly in Arizona, Nevada, Utah, and of course in Hawaii, as well as providing support to refugee and immigrant communities, often concentrated in the several Southern California conferences. To do that, simply mark your giving envelope Impact Pacific, or if you give online, choose the Impact Pacific category under the Conference Union section. On another note, the Church Finance Committee and Board met this week, and we were very encouraged to track the continued support of our church through the giving of your tithes and offerings. Despite this year's unprecedented health and economic challenges, your support remains essentially at the same level as it was last year. Particularly the trust funds are also at the same levels of previous years. And some trusts that, for instance, of the Good Samaritan Fund, has seen an increase in your support. However, there's one fund, the Student Aid or Scholarship Trust, which underwrites the approximate $45,000 that our church grants to families and students each year at Napa Christian. That fund is considerably down. Believe it or not, that trust was supported in large part by donations collected by the young children in advance of the children's story when we were worshiping in person. So may I suggest, as you give each week either in your envelope or online, consider adding that $1 or $5 or $10 bill that you used to give each week, adding that to the online student aid or student scholarship category. I am sure that you, like me, thank God that you are part of this church family. And we thank God that you continue to support this family with your time, with your means, with your prayers, and with your love.
Thank you, Brother Gerhardt, for leading out in our offering. And thank you to our members for your continual faithfulness in the giving of your tithe and offering. The church really appreciates that. At this time, we'll have our prayer, which will be done by Kim Trude.
Let's pray. Father God, we come before you today, and we are not worthy to be in your presence, but you have told us to come boldly before the throne of grace. And you offer us that, Lord, because of the sacrifice of Jesus for us. Jesus came to this earth and lived a perfect life because you knew that we would never do that. And then he died to pay the penalty for every single one of our sins so that we can come boldly before you now and we can go home with you someday and live forever in your presence. We can't begin to understand that, Lord. We take it for granted so often. I ask, Lord, that you will touch our hearts in such a way that we are changed and that we become more and more like you from image to image. That we can be your hands and your feet and your love in this world to those who are hurting. There are many in our church family who are hurting. I ask, Lord, that you would prompt us, show us who they are. Help us to reach out. Help us to be open to share your love with them. Father, I ask that you'd be with our pastor today as he shares your word with us. And I ask that his words would be your words and that we would be changed as a result of hearing your words today. We love you. We thank you for your sacrifice. We thank you for your care for every detail of our lives. In Jesus' precious name, amen.
Thank you, Kim Trude, for your prayer. We appreciate your ministry. God bless you. At this time, we'll be having our reading of the Psalms, and this morning it will be taken from chapter 107, and I'll be reading verses 1 to 7 and 33 to 37. And I'll be reading from the King James Version. If you would like to follow along, you are welcome to do so. Oh, give thanks unto the Lord, for he is good, for his mercy endureth forever. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so, whom he hath redeemed from the hand of the enemy, and gathered them out of the lands, from the east and from the west, from the north and from the south. They wandered in the wilderness in a solitary way. They found no city to dwell in. Hungry and thirsty, their soul fainted in them. Then they cried unto the Lord in their trouble, and he delivered them out of their distresses. And he led them forth by the right hand, and that they might go to the city of inhabitation. He turneth rivers into a wilderness, and the water springs into dry ground, a fruitful land into barrenness, for the wicked of them that dwell therein. He turneth the wilderness into a standing water, and a dry ground into water springs. And there he maketh the hungry to dwell, that they may prepare a city for inhabitation, and sow the fields, and plant the vineyards, which may yield fruits, of increase. At this time, we would like to welcome Allison and Jeremy Hansen, who will be singing a special song for us, and that song will be Enclosed by You.
Good morning, church. It is good to be with you. We love seeing the comments on YouTube, the happy Sabbath, the encouragement, the love that we experience, even though it's online. Napa Church does such a good job of welcoming people, of loving people, and of being graceful with people. I want to say thank you to Star for joining us. If you don't know, she is our head elder and our board chair. And so we are grateful that she comes and gives us this board update. Usually we can do that in person at the church, but we are grateful that she can be part of us. And also big thank you to Sebastian and David. They have stepped in so nicely. Normally we have them doing other things, but right now I think they are doing an exceptional job. And so thank you, fellas, for your work with us today. It makes being online much more enjoyable when we get to interact together. And then lastly, thank you to all of our retired pastors within our congregation. You not only have served your ministries in your time of ministry, but also you've served us here at the church. And many of you have reached out to me in person and have offered your help, your support, your encouragement, and your love. And I am grateful to all of you. So in this month of Pastors Appreciation, let's remember that we come here on the shoulders of those who have come before us. And so thank you for that. We are in Deuteronomy. This should be our last sermon in the Exodus genre. Again, this is not Exodus, but this will be the end of Moses's ministry. Well, until the New Testament, when we see him at the transfiguration with Jesus. But for now, this ministry is ending, and it ends here in Deuteronomy. And one time I heard a friend of mine preach a sermon on the end of Deuteronomy and the beginning of Joshua, and his sermon was about leadership and about changing and the idea of turning the page. Like, Deuteronomy ends and Joshua begins immediately. And so turn the page. And what can you do in your life to turn the page and get going? This was by David Zaid, and he's the pastor at Philadelphia Church down in Long Beach. And I just wanted to send my love to him and thank you for that sermon. I've always kept it. And so when I was studying this, I remembered that turn the page. But I didn't turn the page this week because I wanted to stay here a little bit longer. I wanted to see what happened with Moses and how the ministry finalized. We'll turn the page next week, but I wanted to stay and see how God and Moses interact this last time. In my house, I lose things all the time. I am a little forgetful. I lose my wallet at least once a day. I do. I put it down and I'm sure I put it down there. I go back to where I put it down and it's not there. And so immediately I go to blame someone, usually a child in our house, Alex or Anders. Where did you move it? And they say, we didn't move it. And I say, I'm sure you did. And then I find it in the other safe place that I found it. Actually, I have purchased little things called tiles so that when I lose it, I can hit the button and it rings and I can find it. It's been a lifesaver, and I probably use it once or twice a week because I lose things all the time. But it's interesting that I put it down somewhere in my house and I can't see it. I don't know where it is. Now, if I step back and start retracing my steps, then maybe I can see it and find it. Maybe if I can take a broad view, I can see something. But I'm so concerned about where it is. Oftentimes, I need my wallet because I'm leaving in 5 minutes. I need my keys because I'm leaving in just 2 more minutes. I can't find my keys or I'm going to be late. And that anxiety and that worry prevents me from seeing or finding the things I need to have. Now, I know. If I was well planned, I could put it all out the night before. I can have it all I always put it in the same spot. I know the tricks, but I keep falling back to the way I was. I know the right thing to do, but I keep making the same mistakes. I even have a hook for all my keys, and I still don't put them on there. Jenny might remind me, you know you have a hook to put your keys on. Why didn't you put them there? I know. I just didn't. And it's interesting that because of my anxiety, because of my worry, because of the places I feel I need to be, that I can't see everything. I can't see where I last put it. I can't see where it is. And I think this is going to play into what we're going to talk about today. Maybe you also have that same problem. It might not be a wallet. It might be something else. It could be, if you've ever written a paper, you can't edit your own paper. You can't see your own mistakes. Sometimes if you want to get better at any sport, whether it's running, cycling, tennis, or sports, oftentimes you need a coach, even if just to tell you what you're doing, just to give you an outside perspective. Where in your life do you need an outside perspective? What are the things that you can't see? We are in Deuteronomy 34 this week. We have not gone all the way through Deuteronomy. I didn't think that the congregation would let me still be their pastor if we went through every chapter of Deuteronomy. I wanted to, but we didn't. We're coming to the end where God and Moses interact for the last time. And as my dad pointed out, that he went up this rock, this mountain, and Moses seems to go up and down mountains a lot. If you've been with us from the beginning, you've seen this happen. And this will be the last time Moses goes up a mountain with God. It's not going to be the last time we see Moses on a mountain with God. Again, that's later. But here they are. One of the things I want to point out in the book of Deuteronomy, this is the book of law. This is also part of law. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy is the law books. And they tell us things of what to expect, what God's intentions are, what all those laws encompass. One of the things that you find out in the book of Deuteronomy, one of the biggest deals that Israel seems to fight with is idolatry. You see it with the golden calf early on in the book of Exodus. You see it throughout the different things where they pick up other gods, they pick up other traditions, they start relying on themselves, not on God. And the idolatry of not just the things around them, but even the idolatry of themselves, where they think they are better than God at times, that they know more than God. We've seen that with Moses a little bit, the striking of the rock. Remember? That I will do it my way. And here we find them, God and Moses, interacting for the last time. Let's read Deuteronomy 34, 1 through 3. Just on a side note, doing a sermon on Deuteronomy is really difficult because you have to spell Deuteronomy. And that's really hard to spell Deuteronomy. I often do it duet-eronomy, D-U-E-T, duet. And I've had to make those mistakes all week this week. Anyway, here we are, Deuteronomy 34, 1 through 3. Then Moses went up from the plains of Moab to Mount Nebo, to the top of Pisgah, which is opposite Jericho. And the Lord showed him the whole land, Gilead as far as Dan, all Naphtali, the land of Ephraim and Manasseh, all the land of Judah as far as the western sea, the Negeb and the plain, that is the valley of Jericho, the city of palm trees as far as Zoar. God has taken them up there. This is almost a cinematic moment, right? That must have been a very tall mountain. Now, I've been up some big mountains. Here in the Bay Area, we have two, Mount Tamalpais and Mount Diablo. And when you get to the top of these mountains, you can see forever, right? You can see all the way to the Western Sea. You can see all the way to Oakland and to the Southern Bay Area there. You can see to the mountain ranges onto the sides there. You can see a long way. But even on top of those mountains, I don't think we would have seen as far as Moses saw. Well, I've been on higher mountains. I've been up near Mount Whitney, and this is above 10,000 feet. I've been up on top of Mount Shasta. I've been into Colorado, where we went to the top of the mountains. And again, you can see forever. But I don't think I could see as far as Dan or Ephraim or to the western sea. When Moses goes to the top of the mountain, what we see immediately is that Moses sees further than what one could see normally. It's interesting. I think there is a parallel if we look at the wilderness with Jesus. And Satan takes him to the top of a mountain and shows him all the land and offers it to him. I don't know that we're going to explore that today, but for those of my Bible students and my Bible scholars, that's something to move into and think about. Is there a parallel there? And what does that mean? But here, God has taken him to the top, and he has shown him the entire land. Now, if you're paying attention to this, it's kind of bittersweet, right? We know that this is an amazing moment. You're seeing the entire land. You're seeing it laid out before you. It's also bitter because we know what's coming next. One of the things my family and I would do when we lived in Southern California, we had annual passes to Disneyland and California Adventure. If you live in Southern California, it's almost a requirement that you have a pass to Disneyland. And we would go often. And one of my wife's favorite ride was soaring over California. By the way, I say that, please don't ask her about the time that she thought I didn't go on the ride with her when I probably did go on the ride with her. I just don't ask her about that. That's going to get us into trouble. But we would go on this ride, and soaring over California was this ride that would take you in these chairs, and it would lift you up, and you had almost like a IMAX screen or a circle vision screen, and you're sitting in these chairs that moved and floated, and it felt like you were flying. And they had special scents, so when you flew over the ocean, you smelled the salt water. When you flew over the orange orchards of Orange County, you smelled the citrus, the orange smell. They would blow air on you, and the seats would rumble, jets would fly by. And California, this was a great homage to California. You saw the redwoods, and you saw the northern coastline. You saw the Bay Area and Los Angeles and Hollywood. You saw San Diego beaches that are well known, and you. Not only that, you went over into the Sierras and you saw Mammoth and Squaw, and you saw the deserts, but not just deserts because they're barren, but because they're spectacular. We saw the whole land. We saw the whole land of California in less than 15 minutes, and it was amazing. And I kind of think, when I read this, I start thinking, like, is this what God did? Did he take Moses up high enough to see? And he shows them the promised land. And I start thinking about, what did Moses see? What would you look for? When I get into a plane, I look for those things that are familiar. I look for my house. I look for those freeways. I look for those highways that could go near where the places that I know. Did Moses look for those things that might be familiar, that they heard about? Was Jericho a landmark? Was Zion, the top of Jerusalem, the hills up there, was that a landmark that he watched for? What was he looking for? What would you look for? If God showed you something, what would you look for? If he showed the land that was to come, what would you be looking for? Let's read on. Verses 34, 4 through 5. The Lord said to him, "This is the land which I swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, saying, I will give it to your descendants. I have let you see it with your eyes, but you shall not cross over." Then Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab at the Lord's command. We can easily keep moving on. Nothing to see here. This is pretty straightforward. Except there's some key words I think we should draw out. The land that God showed him was the land of promise. And I think that's worth noting. See, when I think of this moment, I think they just showed the land, that barren land. But the promised land was not just land, was it? It was a promise of a life to come. It was the promise of life well lived. It was the promise of God with you. Are you with me on this? You understand that what he's seen is not just the hills, but maybe he's actually seen valleys lifted up and mountains lowered down. Maybe he's going into the promised land. Maybe he's actually seen that land of milk and honey where there is no more violence, where there is no more hurt, where there is this getting alongness, that there's a people who are following God, who are rejecting their own ways and choosing God's way. Maybe he's not just seeing the landmarks of the area. Maybe he's not just seeing the western shore of the area. Maybe he is seeing the land of promise, where God will triumph over evil, where God is victorious, where God's witness is vindicated. And that shalom that we have heard about, that ultimate peace, will be fulfilled. See, he lets Moses see it with his eyes. So there's something going on here, that we're not just looking at the land that they are to come to, but the land that God has promised. And maybe this is even a future vision. This is a future vision, or maybe even he sees on that hill Jesus Christ. Maybe he sees all the way what Jesus sees, what God sees. Because if God is showing him what God can see, God is not just the present, he's not just the past, but he is also the future. The land of promise is not what you get now, but what God has promised and what God will fulfill. See, when I look at things, I look at what I get. We get Jericho, we get Jerusalem, we get grapes and honey, we get an easier life. And when I read this the first time, I think of the land that Moses looked at without thinking of that future vision that God had promised. See, I look for my own ego and I look for myself. And I start feeling sorry for Moses because he can't fulfill his ministry. He dies, he doesn't get to cross over into that land. He doesn't get to see that victory, his work. And one thing we have to start realizing is that we are not doing this for our own victory. We are doing this to be part of God's plan, God's promise. And I think sometimes we miss that. God lets him see it with his eyes. And he won't cross over. And we know why. If you read Numbers, we know why. He hits the rock instead of speaks to the rock. There's this lack of faith and suddenly this becomes a punishment passage. See, he's being punished. I don't think this is a punishment passage. Do you think God would invite Moses up to see with his eyes God's promise if he was being punished? I don't think so. Early on in Deuteronomy, if we pay attention to this, Moses accepts this role and he actually passes over and hands over the leadership and blesses them before he departs. He gives them, he says, you need to follow Joshua now. It is not mine anymore. I think we don't do that very well. I like to have my ministry, my church, my way. And then someone else comes in like, well, who are you? Do I want to give this to you? And I don't give it to you. But here we see an example of true leadership, someone who truly follows God and realizes this is not my ministry, this is God's ministry, and God is letting me participate in his ministry. I am part of leading people to the promised land, but I am not the promised land. I do not own the promised land. I do not have the promised land. I can only go a little ways at a time. I can only go as far as God wishes me to go because I'm part of God's plan. And so here, Moses doesn't cross over into the promised land, but notice where he does cross over. He crosses over into God's care. So we've read this, and it's like, I can't believe Moses didn't get to go to the promised land. He didn't get to go to the promised land. He got to go to God. And this is the powerful point. We're not trying to have victory over this world so that we can have better houses and better cars and better land. We're trying to participate in be part of God's witness for his promised land, where wounds would be healed, where hurts, where forgiveness is law, where we follow Jesus. And Moses dies there in God's care. I don't know about you, but promised land is not a destination on earth, but a promised land for me is wherever God is. Maybe he was in the center of the promise. I remember my grandparents telling me that Jesus was going to come in their lifetime. And I remember their grandparents, I was told, they were told that Jesus was going to come in their lifetime. And if we go down through Christian history, even the apostles thought Jesus was returning in their lifetime. And so Moses not just speaks to the promised land to come, but it also reminds us that sometimes we stand on those mountains looking at what God is to do, and we don't get to walk that journey anymore. And there's these unfulfilled promises that so many of us stand on the border of, and that boundary of hope and promise. And maybe it's not going to be my turn, and I must give this to someone else. And Moses shows us what true vocation is like, what true calling is like, is to submit completely to God, and then to hand over to the next generation, to those next people willing to walk with people. It's a powerful moment that puts our ego second. Remember, we talked about idolatry at the beginning? What about the idolatry of ego? That it has to be me. Can it be someone else? See, Moses' vocation did not lie in the promised land on earth, but was in the promise of God. Let's read on. Verse 6. He was buried in a valley in the land of Moab, opposite Beth Peor or Peor. But no one knows his place of burial to this day. By the way, can I just comment on something? We think Moses wrote this, but who wrote this? I don't think Moses wrote this last little chapter. So we need to know, I'd like to know, that's one of the questions I want to ask God. It's like, okay, so this is good. We believe Moses wrote the 5 books of the Bible, but was this Joshua? Who else? Was there someone with you? Who's that little guy that was next to you writing this down? That's what I want to know. So he was buried in the valley in the land of Moab, buried by God. So we get the idea here. Moses was 120 years old when he died. His sight was unimpaired. Notice that? And his vigor had not abated. Again, we must go back to God's gift here. That this is not a punishment. That Moses was allowed to see into God's promise uniquely. The Israelites wept for Moses in the plains of Moab 30 days. Then the period of mourning for Moses was ended. Verse 9. Joshua, son of Nun, I think that's funny, was full of the spirit of wisdom because Moses had laid his hands on him and the Israelites obeyed him, doing as the Lord had commanded Moses. Moses didn't feel sorry for himself. He passed the mantle. Moses didn't feel sorry for himself. He prepared Joshua. This is the responsibility of all of us, is to prepare the next people behind us. We need to stop living like the end game is just for me, but the end game is for those that come behind us as well. We must prepare the future, not just for ourselves, but for those that come behind us, for our children and our grandchildren. We must prepare the way. We must show them that following God and how to follow God, and we must bless them and encourage them and give them opportunity to be prepared and to lead. This is the path that Moses showed through God, and I think this is the path that still works today. We would call it discipleship. How old can you be to become a disciple? Well, sometimes we say you can't get baptized till 9, 10, 11. But I've seen some 4 and 5-year-olds leading people. If you speak Jesus, if you speak God's promise, we as the people of God ought to follow. I remember when I'm still parenting, but when my kids were younger and they would say, "Dad, that doesn't sound nice." You know, that's corrective. And that's correct. There's times that I've had to say, "I'm sorry, I am wrong." See, in a world that doesn't believe in forgiveness, that seems weak. But when we follow Jesus, we see that forgiveness is the most powerful place and it's part of the promise. Verse 10. Never since has there arisen a prophet in Israel like Moses. Just read that from the Christian point of view, just real quick. Never since has there arisen a prophet in Israel like Moses. Never. What about Jesus? Maybe that's prophet, priest. Maybe we can get around it like that. But when I read that with the Christian hope in mind, here's someone writing like, "Oh, there's a little bit of despair that there's no prophet like Moses. But Jesus is coming, and Jesus is going to change everyone." But notice this. I want to catch two things. Never a prophet in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face. He was unequaled in all the signs and wonders that the Lord sent him to perform in the land of Egypt against Pharaoh and all his servants and his entire land, and for all the mighty deeds and all the terrifying displays of power that Moses performed in the sight of Israel. I want to point something out here. We've just dealt with this face to face. Now, wait a minute. Didn't God just say you can't see me face to face? What do we do with this? If you see me face to face, you will surely die. And then it says the Lord knew Moses face to face. Check it out. Moses couldn't see the Lord's face, but the Lord knew Moses' face to face. God is intimate with us. God is with us. And we see the word, it's not here, but I hear it. Emmanuel, God with us. Now, if we add that Christian hope in here, we actually do get to see the face of God through Jesus Christ. And the penalty of death is already paid for. You get to know God face to face because of Jesus Christ and what he has done. And there's no one equal to that. I can say that with assurance. It is Jesus Christ. And it's amazing that no one has performed signs and wonders. Well, Jesus is the sign, is the wonder, is the deed, is the promise. Jesus Christ is the promised land. And it's something we can start experiencing. We get to go up onto the mountain, that great mountain, that hill where there was 3 crosses, and we get to look out across the valley and we can see Jesus's promise. And the promise is not to own property. The promise is not to be #blessed to get a new car. The promise is that all nations, all people can gather there in forgiveness and in love. This is the promise that we follow. This is the promise that we share. And if we are to be witnesses to this promised land, let us have the courage to forgive one another. Let us have the courage to love one another, because that's the land flowing with milk and honey. That's the promised land where all people can meet, where every valley is raised up and every mountain is lowered down. And this is not a physical thing. You know it, those mountains in life and those valleys that need to be brought back up, that every path is made straight. We understand this, that the march to the promised land is not to the terrifying valleys of the plains near Jerusalem and Jericho. It's not past the Dead Sea, but it's past those moments in our life that we must forgive someone who has harmed us. We must love someone that we can't love. We must be forgiving when all we can see is hurt. See, God is bringing something to completion, and he's bringing it through Jesus Christ. We have a vision. We are able to see, as Moses saw, God's promise. And that promise is Jesus Christ. See, the great enemy in Deuteronomy is idolatry. And idolatry is simply making gods in our image. And oftentimes I try to create God in my image. I try to create a land that I want to go to, that I want to inhabit, that I want to own. And God says, it's not yours to cross over into. It's mine. Follow me. Jesus says, follow me. Don't lead me. Don't boss me around. Follow me. So I would encourage you today. Take a moment to see the land before us. Not the mountains, not the hills, not the valleys, not the western shore, not Dan, not Jerusalem, not Napa, not Mount Veeder, not the river, not even the bay or the bridges, not even the elections that are coming up. Let's stop making these things about us, the idolatry of self. And let's cross over into God's promise and see the vision of who Jesus is, what Jesus did, because he is the completion of God's promise. And as Jesus might say, or Paul, he would lift a glass and the bread and he would say, until he returns, let us keep clear that vision of the promised land, who is Jesus Christ. And at this time, maybe what we need to do is stop looking at ourselves and turn our eyes upon Jesus.
Oh soul, are you weary and troubled? No light in the darkness you see. There's a light for a look at the Savior, and life more abundant and free. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. His word will not fail you, he promised. Believe him and all will be well. Then go to a world that is dying, his perfect salvation to tell. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. Turn look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace.
Lunel, thank you for that song. We have such gift of music in this church with Allison and Jeremy and Lunel singing that "Turn Your Eyes Upon Jesus." It is so. I'm so grateful that we have them. And I think of our congregation. One of the things that I miss is actually it's not the physical idea of meeting and being a church and going through the rituals of church. It's actually being with people that show me who Jesus is. When I get to church and I greet, I don't know, oftentimes I'd see Jeff and Mary or Steve or Linda in the lobby, and they are so kind and gracious. They show me Jesus. And I go through our Sabbath school classes and I see our upstairs with our early team with Andy and Robin, and I go down to our juniors and with Karen, and I am just so grateful that they are showing Jesus to those kids. I love just going in there and just saying, they're showing Jesus. And then I go and I see the people serving the breakfast foods, what we've been missing. Those little, when Pam puts those together and I sneak food when I'm not supposed to, and they're in there chatting and loving life and showing Jesus by serving one another, by serving us. And then we sing together, and people stick around after church and talk, and we're always showing Jesus in the Napa church. I love Napa. I love being here. I love this congregation. I love this ability, because we're not just saying that land matters and that gaining more things matters. What we are saying every time we gather, every time we meet online, every time we comment in the YouTube chat, every time we reach out and call someone, that Jesus matters, that his promise is true. He is our promised land. So this week, let's continue to reach out to one another, check in on each other, love one another, greet one another. You might need to do some baked goods. And today we have an opportunity, by the way. We would love to see you come by the church between 6 and 7 p.m. That's a good segue, isn't it? No, we would. We're not doing this to hand out candy. That's an excuse. We want to see you guys. Come by. This is not just for the young. This is for the middle and the old. This is for all of us. I want to see you, Daryl. I want to see you, Sharon and John. I want to see some of you that I haven't seen in a while. I want to see Forrest Ames. I want to hear his laugh. I want to see it. Because when I see you, you reflect Jesus. And I need that in my life. So I look forward to seeing. Now, I do hope some of you dress up. Daryl, I hope you dress up. Sharon, get some costumes on. We would love to see that. But we'd like to see you tonight. Not for candy, but for love. And on that, guys, blessings, grace, and peace. May God be in your life. May you have a vision, not of what you get, but of who Jesus is, the true promise. Amen.